I'll tell you something right now. Missouri is about to completely destroy every boring thing you think you know about this state. Because here's the truth. Most people can't even agree on how to pronounce it. Is it Missouri or Missouri? Locals will argue about this until the end of time. Let me know in the comments how you pronounce it. Number 35. The Gateway Arch flexes 18 inches in wind. The Gateway Arch in St. Louis stands 630 feet tall, making it the tallest national monument in the United States. Taller than the Washington Monument, taller than the Statue of Liberty, taller than anything most people associate with a Midwestern city. But the part that doesn't show up on postcards is that the arch is an engineering marvel designed to flex up to 18 inches in high winds and survive a major earthquake. Now, inside each leg, cramped tram pods carry visitors to the top in a ride that feels like being inside a washing machine set to gentle. The arch was built to commemorate St. Louis as the gateway to the West, sitting on the exact spot where Lewis and Clark began their journey into the unknown. The geography of St. Louis at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, the last major city before the frontier, made it the inevitable symbol of American expansion westward. Number 34. Two great rivers collide north of St. Louis. Just north of the city, the Missouri River pours into the Mississippi in one of the most dramatic geographic events visible anywhere in the country. Here's the fact that starts arguments at dinner tables. The Missouri River is actually longer than the Mississippi, stretching 2,341 miles from Montana, which technically makes the Mississippi a tributary of the Missouri. The two rivers are so different in color and character that you can see the line where they meet from above. Muddy brown Missouri crashing into greenish Mississippi, running side by side for miles before finally blending. This confluence made St. Louis the most important city in 19th century America, the funnel point through which every person and every shipment moving into the interior of the continent had to pass. The geography of Missouri, sitting at the junction of the two great river systems of North America, gave the state an economic and strategic advantage that no map drawer could have planned better. Number 33. Lewis and Clark left from here and changed everything. In May 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark departed from near St. Louis with about 45 men, headed into territory no American government had ever mapped. They were gone 2.5 years, covered nearly 8,000 miles, and produced scientific records of plants and animals that scientists are still studying today. Missouri was the last piece of known territory before the vast unknown, making it the natural launching point for the greatest expedition in American history. Number 32. Mark Twain grew up watching the Mississippi. Samuel Clemens, who became Mark Twain, was born in a tiny Missouri town in 1835 and moved to Hannibal at age 4. And it was Hannibal, the river town on the Mississippi, that gave him everything he needed to become one of America's greatest writers. Tom Sawyer's Cave, Becky Thatcher's house, the river boys swimming in, the steamboats coming around the bend, all of it was Hannibal, Missouri. Twain described the Mississippi as something alive, something with moods and tempers, and he wrote about it the way people write about someone they love and fear at the same time. Hannibal today is a pilgrimage site for readers from around the world who come to walk down to the river and stand where a boy became a writer. The geography of the Mississippi River Valley, broad, unpredictable, and teeming with life, shaped the imagination of the man who wrote the most beloved American novel ever put to paper. Number 31. Kansas City rivals Rome in decorative fountains. Kansas City has approximately 200 fountains scattered throughout the city, earning it the title of Fountain City and placing it second only to Rome in fountains per capita, a fact Kansas City will share with you immediately and repeatedly. The fountains range from grand Beaux-Arts monuments with muscular bronze horses to whimsical neighborhood pieces nobody planned but everyone loves. Nobody sat down and decided Kansas City should become a fountain city. It happened organically over decades as wealthy citizens and civic organizations donated fountains to celebrate weddings, anniversaries, and civic milestones. The geography of Kansas City, built across steep hills with dramatic terrain, gives every fountain a setting that makes it look like it was always meant to be there. Walk around the city long enough and you'll keep stumbling across fountains you've never seen before. It is wonderful, slightly absurd, and completely Missouri. Number 30. The 1904 World's Fair fed America forever. The Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis attracted 20 million visitors and introduced the world to wireless telephones, X-ray machines, and the first automatic dishwasher. But the two inventions people actually remember are the ice cream cone and the hot dog in a bun. Vendors at the fair claim credit for both, and food historians have spent a genuinely alarming amount of energy debating who actually invented the ice cream cone first. Missouri does not care about the debate. Missouri cares that two of the greatest foods in the history of human civilization have strong St. Louis credentials, and the World's Fair that introduced them drew more visitors in 1904 than any event America had ever hosted. The geography of St. Louis, centrally located with rail access from the entire country, made it the logical host for an exposition meant to celebrate the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase, the real estate deal that doubled the size of the nation. Number 29. Jesse James became Missouri's most complicated legend. Jesse James was born in Kearney, Missouri in 1847, and he robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches across the Midwest for 15 years while somehow becoming something close to a folk hero in the state that wanted him caught. James operated out of Missouri, had a network of local sympathizers, and was nearly impossible to capture in a landscape he knew better than anyone. After riding with Confederate guerrillas during the Civil War, James represented something to poor Missourians, a man striking back at the banks and railroads they felt were robbing them. He was shot in the back of the head by a member of his own gang in his own living room in St. Joseph in 1882, 34 years old. His house in St. Joseph and his birthplace in Kearney are both museums today, and Missourians remain genuinely proud of a man who was technically a murderer and a thief. That says something interesting about the American relationship with outlaw mythology. Number 28. The Pony Express launched from Missouri. The Pony Express launched from St. Joseph, Missouri on April 3, 1860, and lasted exactly 19 months before the transcontinental telegraph made it instantly obsolete. Riders carried mail from Missouri to Sacramento in 10 days, a journey that previously took weeks through terrain that was genuinely dangerous and absolutely unforgiving. In those 19 months, the Pony Express became one of the most iconic images of the American frontier, and it all started in Missouri, where civilization gave way to the open West. Number 27. Kansas City invented a new kind of jazz. In the 1920s and 1930s, Kansas City developed a style of jazz distinct from anything coming out of New Orleans or New York. Built on riff-based blues structures, all-night jam sessions, and a loose, swinging feeling that put groove above everything else, the clubs along 18th and Vine Street ran until dawn. Musicians competed and pushed each other, and the music that emerged produced Count Basie, Charlie Parker, and Big Joe Turner. Kansas City was a railroad hub where musicians from the Deep South passed through on their way north, creating a crossroads where musical traditions met and something genuinely new was born. The geography of Kansas City, a livestock and railroad city at the junction of the southern and northern United States, made it a funnel for people, culture, and sound from every direction. The 18th and Vine Jazz District still celebrates this heritage, and the American Jazz Museum there is one of the finest in the country. Number 26. Churchill launched the Cold War from a tiny Missouri town. In March 1946, former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill traveled to Fulton, Missouri, a town of about 8,000 people, to deliver a speech at Westminster College. Accompanied by President Harry Truman, who was from Missouri himself, Churchill declared that an Iron Curtain had descended across the continent of Europe. That phrase, Iron Curtain, defined the next 40 years of global politics and announced the Cold War to the world. It happened not in Washington or London or New York, but in a small Missouri college town because a local college president wrote a letter to Truman asking him to bring Churchill. There is a piece of the actual Berlin Wall in Fulton now, sent after the wall came down in 1989, as a symbol of how far the world had traveled since that speech. The most consequential geopolitical address of the 20th century was delivered in a place most people have never heard of. Number 25. The Missouri Compromise postponed the Civil War by 40 years. When Missouri applied for statehood as a slave state in 1820, it triggered a national crisis that nearly broke the young country apart before the republic was 50 years old. The compromise that emerged, admitting Missouri as a slave state, Maine as a free state, and drawing a line across the Louisiana Territory, held the country together through an uneasy peace that lasted until the 1850s. Missouri's geography, straddling the border between North and South in every cultural, economic, and political sense, made it the perfect flashpoint for the argument the country could not yet bring itself to have. The Missouri Compromise was not a solution. It was a delay, a postponement of a reckoning that was always coming. Standing in the old Missouri State House where this debate raged, you're in the room where America kicked its hardest problem down the road for as long as it possibly could. Number 24. Dred Scott sued for his freedom in St. Louis. Dred Scott was an enslaved man who filed suit in the St. Louis Circuit Court, arguing that his time living in free states and territories had made him legally free. The case wound through the Missouri courts and eventually reached the Supreme Court, which, in 1857, delivered one of the most catastrophic rulings in American legal history, declaring Scott was not a citizen, that enslaved people were property, and that Congress had no authority to prohibit slavery anywhere. The decision enraged the North, supercharged the abolitionist movement, and set the country on a direct course toward war. Scott's freedom suit was filed in the old courthouse in St. Louis, now preserved as part of the Gateway Arch National Park, a building where a man tried to claim his humanity through the legal system and was told by the highest court in the land that the system did not apply to him. Before continuing, be sure to subscribe and leave a like to keep discovering strange and incredible facts about every U.S. state. Number 23. Harry Truman embodied Missouri's plain-spoken character. Harry Truman was born in Lamar, Missouri in 1884, grew up in Independence, and returned there after his presidency to walk to the post office and pick up his own mail like a regular person. His presidency included dropping atomic bombs on Japan, firing General MacArthur, integrating the United States military, and intervening in Korea, decisions that shaped the modern world. The simple, plain-spoken stubbornness that defined Truman was very much a product of small-town Missouri. He was not glamorous, not conventionally charismatic, and he shaped the world anyway. Number 22. Merrimack Caverns perfected the American roadside attraction. Merrimack Caverns in Stanton, Missouri is the greatest roadside attraction that ever existed, in large part because its owners paid farmers along Route 66 to paint the cavern's name on their barn roofs for decades, creating one of the most aggressive advertising campaigns in American history. The caverns themselves are genuinely spectacular. 5 levels of underground passages and chambers, so large one was once used as a dance hall. The owners also claim Jesse James used the caves as a hideout, which may or may not be completely true, but Merrimack Caverns is absolutely committed to the story. Number 21. George Washington Carver was born into slavery in Diamond, Missouri around 1864 and went on to develop over 300 products derived from peanuts and transform Southern agriculture by promoting crops that could restore soil nutrients depleted by cotton. The George Washington Carver National Monument in Diamond is the first national monument dedicated to an African American. Carver grew up in a state that had been a slave state and produced the Dred Scott decision, left to get an education Missouri would not provide him, and went on to change the world. Number 20. The Lake of the Ozarks never slows down. The Lake of the Ozarks was created in 1931 when Bagnell Dam was built across the Osage River, flooding the Ozark valleys and producing a reservoir with 1,150 miles of shoreline, more than the entire coastline of California. Every summer, that shoreline fills wall-to-wall with pontoon boats, speedboats, jet skis, and houseboats, surrounding waterfront bars that can only be reached by water. It is extremely loud, occasionally chaotic, and universally beloved by the Missourians, who descend on it every Memorial Day and don't surface until Labor Day. The geography of the Ozarks, steep hills and hollows carved by rivers draining into the Osage, created exactly the kind of terrain that, once flooded, becomes an irregular, sprawling paradise of hidden coves and open water. If you have never watched a Missouri summer unfold at the Lake of the Ozarks, you have missed something genuinely irreplaceable. Number 19. Branson has more theater seats than Broadway. Branson, Missouri, tucked into the Ozark Mountains in the southern part of the state, built more theater seats than the entire Broadway district in New York City, and it will tell you this fact without hesitation or apology. The strip of Highway 76 through Branson is lined with theaters hosting country music acts, magicians, comedians, tribute bands, and entertainers who are still giving everything they have to audiences who came specifically to see them. At its peak in the 1990s, Branson attracted more tourists annually than Nashville. The geography of the Ozarks, scenic lake country with a rural, conservative character, attracted a particular kind of entertainment and a particular kind of devoted audience. Branson has never worried whether coastal critics consider it legitimate or sophisticated, which is exactly the kind of attitude you'd expect from a place that simply built its own Broadway in the mountains and started selling tickets. Number 18. The Missouri mule built the American West. The Missouri mule became the most important work animal in 19th century America. Stronger than horses, more sure-footed on rough terrain, more resistant to heat and disease, and capable of working longer without breaking down. Missouri farmers perfected mule breeding by crossing large draft stallions with smaller female donkeys, producing an animal tailored to the demands of American expansion. Missouri mules pulled wagons on the Santa Fe Trail, plowed fields across the Deep South, hauled Civil War supplies for the Union Army, and were still being used for military logistics in World War II. The geography of Missouri, with both the grasslands and river bottom land to raise and trade large numbers of animals, made it the natural center of the mule industry. Missouri's official state animal is the Missouri mule, a decision the state made because it is accurate and because Missourians are not embarrassed to be proud of an animal that is stubborn, strong, and refuses to be pushed around. Number 17. Anheuser-Busch was born in St. Louis and stayed. Anheuser-Busch was founded in St. Louis in 1852 by German immigrants and grew into the largest brewery in the world. The Budweiser Clydesdales were introduced in 1933 to celebrate the end of Prohibition and still live at the Warm Springs Ranch breeding facility in Boonville, Missouri, where the public can visit them. The geography of St. Louis on the Mississippi, with access to Midwestern grain and river ice for cooling, made it ideal for large-scale brewing. Anheuser-Busch was eventually acquired by a Belgian company, which St. Louis found rude. Number 16. Route 66 truly begins its journey in Missouri. Route 66 runs 317 miles through Missouri, more than any other state it passes through, connecting the Merrimack Caverns barns, the Chain of Rocks Bridge, classic diners, and small towns built entirely around the highway's traffic. When Interstate 44 replaced it, dozens of Missouri towns were bypassed and never fully recovered. St. Louis is where the road truly begins its push west, and Missouri's position as the geographic threshold between east and west made Route 66 through the state feel like the real start of the American journey. Number 15. The Missouri Botanical Garden leads global plant science. The Missouri Botanical Garden in St. Louis was founded in 1859 by a hardware merchant named Henry Shaw, who got rich, looked around, and decided the most lasting thing he could build was a garden. It is the oldest botanical garden in continuous operation in the United States, and one of the leading centers of plant science research in the world, with scientists who have documented more species than almost any other institution on Earth. The 79-acre campus includes a Japanese garden, a Chinese garden, and the Climatron, the first fully climate-controlled geodesic dome greenhouse ever constructed. In a city most people associate with beer, baseball, and the arch, there exists a world-class scientific institution dedicated entirely to understanding plants. This is Missouri being quietly extraordinary while nobody is paying attention, which turns out to be one of the state's defining habits. Number 14. The Ozarks are ancient beyond easy comprehension. The Ozark Plateau is one of the oldest landforms in North America, and the St. Francois Mountains in southern Missouri expose rocks that are over 1.5 billion years old, among the oldest surface geology anywhere in the continental United States. Missouri also holds more than 1,100 springs, more than any other state, including Big Spring near Van Buren, which discharges over 276 million gallons of water per day, the largest single outlet spring in the country. The ancient limestone and dolomite of the Ozarks has been dissolved by groundwater for hundreds of millions of years, creating a landscape riddled with caves, sinkholes, and underground rivers that surface as springs. People have been drawn to those springs for thousands of years, building communities around water that never stops flowing regardless of drought or season. Standing beside Big Spring, watching that volume of water pour out of the earth, you're seeing geology in motion in a way that is genuinely difficult to process. Number 13. Kansas City barbecue covers every meat on earth. Every American barbecue region has its specialty. Texas does beef, Memphis does ribs, Carolina does whole hog, but Kansas City does everything and does it all seriously. Beef brisket, pork ribs, burnt ends, pulled pork, chicken, turkey, sausage, and lamb all appear on Kansas City menus, slow smoked over hickory and finished with a thick, sweet tomato and molasses sauce that became the default template for what most Americans think of when they imagine barbecue sauce. Kansas City has over 100 barbecue restaurants, and the American Royal Barbecue Contest held there is the largest competition of its kind in the world. The geography of Kansas City, a livestock market where cattle came north from Texas and hogs arrived from all directions, gave the city access to every animal worth cooking and a culture that took that access seriously. Arthur Bryant's and Gates Bar BQ are not just restaurants here, they are civic institutions. Number 12. The Katy Trail spans the entire state. The Katy Trail runs 240 miles across Missouri along the old Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad route, making it the longest rail trail in America. The trail follows the Missouri River Valley through limestone bluffs, river bottomland, and small towns like Rocheport and Herman that welcome cyclists with bike-friendly inns and restaurants. Cycling the Katy Trail through a Missouri that existed before highways rearranged everything, it is genuinely one of the most beautiful long rides in America, and most people have never heard of it. Number 11. The Cardinals are the Heartland's baseball team. The St. Louis Cardinals have won 11 World Series championships, more than any National League franchise and second only to the New York Yankees in all of baseball. Baseball in St. Louis operates as civic religion in a way that is difficult to convey to someone who hasn't experienced it. A city one-third the size of New York that fills its stadium because Cardinals fans simply show up, generation after generation. Stan Musial, Bob Gibson, Ozzie Smith, Albert Pujols. These are not merely athletes in St. Louis, they are figures who shaped the character and self-understanding of an entire city. For decades before the leagues expanded westward, St. Louis was the westernmost city with a major league team, which meant the Cardinals were the team of the entire American interior. When St. Louis won, the whole heartland won with them, and that identity never entirely went away. Number 10. Missouri borders more states than anyone else. Missouri touches 8 other states: Iowa to the north, Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee to the east, Arkansas to the south, and Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska to the west, more than any other state in the country. This is not a geographic coincidence. Missouri sits at the exact center of the continental United States, the point where the industrial north transitions to the agricultural south and where the eastern United States gives way to the Great Plains. Its politics are persistently purple because its population was shaped by influences from every direction. Its culture is a blend because its neighbors are everyone. The geography of Missouri, flat enough for roads and rivers to pass through from any direction, central enough to connect all regions, made it the state that all other states had to cross to get anywhere. 8 borders means 8 conversations about who Missouri is, and Missouri has never fully resolved any of them. Number 9. The Civil War tore Missouri in half. During the Civil War, Missouri did not leave the Union, but produced a Confederate government in exile and sent soldiers to both sides, fighting in 69 Union regiments and 31 Confederate regiments simultaneously. The guerrilla warfare along the Missouri-Kansas border was some of the most brutal and personal fighting of the entire war. Neighbor against neighbor, family against family. Missouri's geography, sharing a border with free Kansas to the west and slave Kentucky to the south, put it in an impossible position that fractured the state along lines that took generations to heal. No neutral exit. The wounds from that border war ran so deep that communities in western Missouri were still settling scores a generation after Appomattox. Missouri's Civil War was not fought on grand battlefields. It was fought on back roads, at farm gates, and in courthouse squares. Number 8. Union Station was once the world's busiest terminal. Union Station in St. Louis, opened in 1894, was the largest and busiest railroad terminal in the world at its peak, with over 100,000 passengers passing through its doors on a single day during the height of rail travel. The Grand Hall, with its 65-foot barrel-vaulted ceiling, intricate Romanesque stonework, and stained glass, is one of the great interior spaces in American architecture and, arguably, the most beautiful room in Missouri. When air travel replaced passenger trains, Union Station fell into decline and came dangerously close to being demolished. It was restored as a hotel, aquarium, and entertainment complex, and the Grand Hall is preserved in all its original grandeur. The geography of St. Louis, the exact junction where eastern railroads met western lines, made a terminal of this scale and ambition inevitable. Standing in the Grand Hall today, you're inside a room built for the age when arriving in St. Louis meant arriving at the center of the world. Number 7. Cahokia was larger than medieval London. Directly across the Mississippi River from St. Louis stood Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico. At its peak, around 1100 AD, Cahokia had a population of up to 20,000 people, larger than London at the time, with a trading network stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. The geography that made Cahokia possible, the rich bottomlands at the confluence of the continent's 2 greatest rivers, is the same geography that later made St. Louis the gateway to the West. Different peoples, different centuries, the same landscape calling out to be the center of things. Number 6. The Missouri River always wins eventually. The Missouri River is not a subtle force. It drains 1/6 of the entire continental United States, collecting runoff from Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa, before pouring all of it through Missouri on the way to the Mississippi. The 1993 flood was the most destructive in American history at the time. 49 deaths, 75,000 people displaced, $15 billion in damage, with floodwater that covered the land for months rather than days. Towns that had stood on the river for 150 years were simply abandoned afterward. Some never rebuilt. The geography of the Missouri River Basin, a watershed of 500,000 square miles funneling into a single channel, means the river is always carrying more than any human infrastructure was designed to handle. Missourians have a complicated relationship with the Missouri River. They live beside it, farm it, fish it, celebrate it, and they know, somewhere in the back of their minds, that it will eventually win. Number 5. Show me is more than a motto. Missouri's unofficial state motto, Show me, is traced to an 1899 congressman who supposedly declared that he was from Missouri and you would have to show him before he believed anything. The phrase attached itself to a sense of Missouri skepticism, a reputation for demanding evidence, for not being impressed by claims that haven't been demonstrated, for trusting what you can see over what you've been told. Missourians adopted this as a point of pride, a declaration of practical stubbornness that they consider a virtue. Whether the original story is completely accurate is, appropriately, debated by historians. What is undeniable is that the phrase captures something real about a state positioned permanently at the intersection of competing American regions and identities, surrounded on all sides by different versions of what the country should be, and required to evaluate all of them before making up its mind. Number 4. Scott Joplin created ragtime in Missouri. Scott Joplin, the king of ragtime, developed his compositional style in Sedalia, Missouri in the 1890s, where he worked in clubs along Maple Avenue and refined the syncopated piano music that would become one of the first distinctly American contributions to world music. His Maple Leaf Rag, published in 1899 and named for a Sedalia club, became the first piece of sheet music to sell over 1 million copies. Joplin was born in Texas, but Missouri made him, the clubs, the audiences, the publisher John Stark, who took a chance on his compositions, and the River City culture of Sedalia and later St. Louis gave his genius a platform. The geography of Missouri, positioned between the musical traditions of the Deep South and the commercial markets of the industrial North, created the conditions for a new kind of music to emerge, be recorded, and reach the world. Number 3. Branson's live music carries a Ozark tradition forward. Long before Branson built its theaters, the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri were saturated with a distinct musical tradition. Fiddle music, gospel, and ballads carried by Scots Irish settlers into the hollows and hills and preserved there for generations while the rest of the country moved on. The Shepherd of the Hills, Harold Bell Wright's 1907 novel set in the Ozarks, introduced that culture to a national audience and turned the region into a destination for people who wanted to see what old America looked like. The geography of the Ozarks, isolated hills and valleys that made outside influence slow to arrive, preserved musical and cultural traditions that had long since vanished elsewhere. Branson eventually commercialized that heritage on a massive scale, but the thread from the old fiddle tunes in the hollows to the theaters on Highway 76 is real, and it runs straight through Missouri's hill country. Number 2. Missouri's geography made it everybody's territory. Missouri has 3 completely distinct geographic regions that feel like separate states sharing a name. The northern plains are flat, glaciated farmland continuous with Iowa. The Ozark Plateau in the south and center is ancient, hilly, and forested, more Appalachian in character than Midwestern. The Mississippi and Missouri River bottomlands are fertile, low-lying agricultural corridors that connect Missouri to the south as much as to the north. These 3 regions produced different crops, attracted different settlers, developed different cultures, and have voted differently from each other for 200 years. East Tennesseans identify as East Tennesseans first. The same is true in Missouri, where a farmer in the Ozarks and a resident of St. Louis and a corn grower on the northern plains live in what is technically the same state and genuinely wonder about each other sometimes. The geography of Missouri created a state that contains multitudes, and those multitudes have never entirely agreed on what Missouri is. Number 1. Missouri has always been the crossroads. The final and most defining fact about Missouri is the one that explains everything else. This state has been at the center of American history not by accident but by geography. Lewis and Clark left from Missouri because the continent's great rivers met here. The Pony Express launched from Missouri because it was the last eastern city before the frontier. The Missouri Compromise happened because this state sat on the exact border between slavery and freedom. The Dred Scott case came from Missouri's courts because St. Louis was where the argument about human freedom was impossible to avoid. Route 66 began its journey west from Missouri because this was the threshold between the known country and the open road. The Gateway Arch stands in St. Louis because generations of Americans stood on this ground, looked west, and went anyway. Missouri is not the most dramatic state, does not have the most obvious natural wonders, and does not demand your attention the way mountains or coastlines do. What it has is position, the right place at every right moment, the state that has always been exactly where history needed something to happen. Now that you know these 35 facts about Missouri, tell us which one surprised you the most. Drop it in the comments, and let's see how many of us picked the same one. And if you've got your own Missouri fact to share, we'd love to hear it. Your comments help us make every video better. And don't forget to subscribe and give it a like so we can keep exploring the hidden stories of every state together. See you in the next one.